There was a village nestled between two dusty hills where the trees hummed when no one spoke, and the wind carried stories like birdsong across the roofs of old mud huts. The sun always seemed to linger there, casting a golden hue upon the earth, just a few minutes longer than it did in other places. Time did not rush in this village. It wandered. It paused. It sat beneath the baobab trees and listened. And so, they called it the village that never sleeps, not because the people stayed awake, but because something deeper, older, and wiser remained watchful even when all eyes were closed. The baobab at the heart of the village was a giantess, bark silvered with age, roots like the arms of 100 ancestors twisted into the earth. They said the tree had stood there before names were written, before drums were carved, and long before the first hunter speared his prey. Elders sat beneath it every evening, their backs leaning against the trunk, their hands curled around carved canes or clay cups of palm wine. Smoke from distant cooking fires drifted lazily around them, fragrant with yam, fish, and spices. And always, there were whispers low, croaking, breathy whispers that had no clear beginning or end. Cato, a boy of 12 summers, sat a few paces away from the elders, cross-legged in the dust, tracing patterns in the ground with a stick. His mother had told him not to sit so close to the old men and their stories. Those tales are not for children, she warned. They are stories that curl around your heart like smoke and never let go. But Cato didn't care. Something inside him ached to know, not just to listen, but to truly know. Tonight, the air was thick with heat but still, like the village itself was holding its breath. The lead elder, Baba Onail, wore a robe of deep indigo and a crown of white hair that seemed to float around his head like a halo. His voice had the weight of drums, deep and patient. He began, not with words, but with a soft hum. The other elders joined in, forming a chord that thrummed through the air like the vibration of distant thunder. And then, as the fire crackled, lo, Baba Onail spoke. Long ago, before even the sun knew when to rise and when to set, there was a god who was not a god, at least, not in the way the others were. His name was Eshu. At the mention of the name, one of the elder women spat lightly on the ground, a gesture of respect or warning. Cato couldn't tell which. Baba Onail smiled but did not pause. Eshu of the Crossroads, he continued. Eshu, the trickster. Eshu, the messenger of the Orisha. He is the whisper between right and wrong, the laughter at the end of a prayer, the shadow behind your shadow. Cato's fingers froze mid-pattern. He had heard the name whispered before, in jokes, in warnings, in lullabies meant to quiet restless children. Eshu was the one who turned friends into enemies with a single word. He was the reason goats went missing, the cause behind sudden storms and unexpected blessings. No one built a shrine to Eshu without also leaving a bit of food at the nearest crossroads, just in case. Eshu was neither good nor evil, Baba Onail said. He was balance. He was choice. He could wear a red hat on one side and a black hat on the other, walking between two farmers and making each swear the other was blind. He loved confusion, but more than that, he loved truth hidden beneath mischief. The elders chuckled, some nodding, some frowning, all remembering something unspoken. Cato leaned in, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. His stick had dropped from his hand. The firelight danced in the glassy darkness of his pupils. There are those, said another elder, this one with a voice like rustling leaves, who say that if you stand at a crossroads at midnight and speak Eshu's name 3 times, he will come. Not in the way you expect, though. Not as a man, maybe as a dog. maybe a crow, maybe as a voice behind your ear, laughing when no one else hears. And what does he want? Cato asked without meaning to. The question escaped like breath in the cold. The elders turned to look at him, not unkindly, but slowly, the way one might turn toward a river that just whispered your name. Baba O'Neill studied Cato with a long gaze, then set down his cup. What does he want? Baba repeated. Ah, child. Eshu doesn't want. He offers choices, roads, paths, tests, and sometimes he offers chaos wrapped in a gift. The fire popped, sending a small ember swirling into the sky. Cato watched it rise, imagining it as a spark from Eshu's pipe, drifting down from some unseen perch in the clouds. He felt something stir in the air, a cool breath in the warm night. The baobab groaned slightly in the wind, as though reacting to the stories being told beneath its limbs. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed through the clearing, lifting dust and leaves in a short-lived spiral. The fire flickered, the elders fell silent, and even the insects stopped humming. From far off, just beyond the edge of the village, a flute played soft, wavering, and strange. No one moved. The sound did not match any tune the villagers played. It was old, older than rhythm, older than fear. Cato's heart pounded. He looked toward the direction of the sound, but all he could see was the flickering of fireflies in the darkness. Baba O'Neill's eyes narrowed. He whispered, "He listens, even when uninvited." The wind died. The flute faded. The normal sounds of the night resumed as if nothing had happened. But the air remained charged, like a drum waiting for a strike. One of the elders stood, brushed off his robe, and began walking home. The others followed, in no particular hurry, their movements thoughtful. As they left, Baba O'Neill turned to Cato one last time. "You asked what he wants," he said softly. "Perhaps you should ask instead what you want, because once you meet Eshu, child, you cannot unmeet him." Then he too disappeared into the night, leaving Cato alone under the giant baobab, where the wind still rustled faintly and the whispers in the leaves refused to stop. Cato remained sitting long after the fire had gone to sleep. The feather-shaped shadow of a leaf quivered on the ground before him. The crossroads were not far from here. He had always known where they were, to dusty paths meeting at the edge of the yam fields. He had never thought much about them before tonight. But now, something deep inside him had shifted, like the slow turn of the earth beneath his feet. Not fear, not excitement, just an itch. A possibility in the silence. Far off, a laugh low, amused, and knowing rose and vanished on the wind. To the wind moved with an odd rhythm that night, as if it were dancing rather than drifting. Cato awoke with a start, though he didn't remember falling asleep. His mat beside the fire had grown cold, and the embers pulsed like sleeping hearts. In the coals, the moon outside filtered through the cracks in the thatch roof, bathing his tiny room in a silvery haze. Somewhere in the distance, a flute played again, soft, offbeat, not of this world. He sat up, heart beating gently, as if in time with the strange tune. He had dreamt of Crossroads, of red hats and black feathers, of laughter that bent the world sideways. And now, that same flute was calling. He stood, feet brushing the packed earthen floor, and tiptoed past the sleeping forms of his mother and little sister. The door creaked only slightly, and the world beyond was aglow in pale moonlight. A dog barked in the distance, but only once, then fell quiet again. Cato didn't know why his legs were already moving. Perhaps he didn't need to know. Some questions don't ask for permission. His bare feet touched the cool dirt path as he moved silently past the yam fields, past the granary shaped like a tall beehive, and toward the edge of the village where the two dirt roads met, the crossroads. The flute stopped just as he arrived. There was no grand arrival, no flash, no voice calling his name, just stillness and dust, and silence so full it seemed to hum. The moon hung like a lazy eye overhead, glowing through a thin veil of cloud. Crickets chirped in waves, and something rustled nearby, though when Cato looked, there was nothing. His hand brushed against something soft, and he looked down to find a feather sleek, long, shimmering black caught between two stones on the path. He picked it up, unsure why, but immediately knew it had meaning. Then, behind him, a figure appeared. It had not walked up. It had not stepped from the trees. It was simply there, as though it had always been part of the scene but had just now agreed to be noticed. The figure was cloaked in a robe that shimmered red on one side and black on the other. The robe flowed, though there was no breeze. The face was hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, its edges flickering like shadow against moonlight. Cato froze, the feather clenched in his small hand. He wanted to run, but his legs rooted to the earth as though he were part tree. "You dropped this," the figure said, though its mouth never moved. The voice came from behind Cato's own ear, like a whisper tucked inside his breath. "I found it," Cato managed to say. His voice was steadier than he expected. "Is that what you think?" the figure said. "Or did it find you?" Cato looked down at the feather again. It was unlike anything he'd seen, slick like raven's wing, but it shimmered blue when tilted and left a faint trail of warmth where it touched his palm. "Who are you?" Cato asked. The figure chuckled. "They've told you stories, haven't they? Of hats with two colors, of footsteps that walk in both directions, of the one who answers questions with riddles, and riddles with questions." "Eshu," Cato whispered. At that name, the night itself seemed to inhale. The wind stopped moving. The moon dimmed slightly, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if the entire world turned its ear toward that one word. "Names are tricky," the figure said. "Some are masks, others are mirrors. Mine is both. But yes, that is one of the names they give me." Cato swallowed hard. "Why did you call me here?" "I didn't," said Eshu. "You came because the question was too loud to sleep through. That is all." Cato blinked. "What question?" Eshu tilted his head slightly. "Why does a boy sit beneath a tree full of whispers, night after night, and ask nothing? Why does he listen harder than the old men who speak? Why does he feel the pull of the road when he's barely learned how to walk alone?" Cato was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I want to know what's real." "Ah," said Eshu, stepping closer, the robe swaying with no movement. "Then you must learn what is not real first. That's where all the best truths hide." He lifted his hand. In it was not a riddle, not a gift, but a coin. Round, small, ordinary. He flipped it into the air. It didn't fall. It hovered between them, spinning slowly, one side red, the other black. "Every path has two sides," Eshu said. "Every choice, two faces. Every truth is half lie, every lie, half truth." The coin spun faster now, blurring into a dull glow. Then it split in two, and both halves vanished into nothingness. "You stand at a crossroads now, boy. Not just of road, but of self. Most never even notice when they arrive. But you felt it." Cato looked around. The road stretched off into the dark, one toward the forest, thick and winding, the other toward the hills, dry and moonlit. He'd walked both before, but tonight, they felt different, as if they knew he was watching. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," he said. "That," Eshu replied with a smile in his voice, "is the first honest thing anyone ever says at a crossroads." The figure turned and began to walk down the path leading to the forest. But before fading into the shadows, he looked back. Though Kato still could not see his face, he could feel the eyes deep, amused, ancient. "You may follow, or you may not," Eshu said. "Either choice is correct, but both will lead to change." And with that, the trickster of Crossroads vanished into the trees. Not in a blink, not with a puff of smoke, he simply ceased to be, like a word swallowed by silence. Kato stood alone. Once more, the feather in his hand twitched. Far off, the flute played again, a single wavering note, then stopped. The night resumed its usual song: crickets, frogs, and the occasional rustle of leaves. But Kato felt different now, not braver, not wiser, just aware. He turned toward the forest road and took one step forward, not because he was certain, but because uncertainty had just become his teacher. And somewhere, on some invisible breeze, laughter trickled like water between stones. Morning broke in the village like a sigh, the kind that follows restless dreams. The sun peeked above the hill slowly, hesitant, as though uncertain whether it was welcome today. The baobab tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves whispering. The tail end of a dream someone had forgotten to finish. Kato hadn't slept. Not really. He had returned from the crossroads long after midnight, the feather still in his hand, the name Eshu flickering in his thoughts like candlelight. He hadn't told anyone where he went or what he saw. It felt impossible, like trying to explain what the wind smelled like to someone who had never breathed. But his feet itched with movement, his thoughts hummed like drums, and his tongue it burned with words he didn't recognize at first light. Kato walked to the village market, still clutching the feather. He wore his oldest tunic, not to attract attention, but the air around him seemed different, charged, almost electric. People noticed him without meaning to. The market was just waking up. Merchants were rolling out woven mats, setting down baskets of red yams, salted fish, carved calabashes, dyed fabrics, and bundles of herbs. A goat bleated somewhere near the blacksmith's corner, and a woman haggled over the price of dried okra with a scowl that could split stone. Kato stopped in the middle of it all. He didn't plan to speak, but the words came anyway, like something poured through him from another place. He stood on a small stone near the storyteller's bench and said, loudly and clearly, "A man walks down a road with a hat that is red on one side and black on the other. Two farmers see him, one from the left, one from the right. They both swear he wore only one color. Who lies?" People paused. A few turned. "What did the boy say?" Someone asked. "Something about a hat." "A riddle." Kato repeated it. This time, louder. His voice didn't shake. It rang clear, like a bell. Within moments, people began to gather. A circle formed around him. The vendors abandoned their stalls. Even the old woman selling bitter cola stopped chewing and narrowed her eyes. One of the farmers, a Johnny, crossed his arms. "It's a trick," he said. "The man must have lied to one of them." "No," said Elder Mama Kemi, shaking her head. "The man wore both colors. The farmers only saw what was in front of them. But one of them must still be wrong," shouted a boy from the edge. "They're both right and wrong," said another. "That's the point." "No," a Johnny snapped. "That's foolishness. You cannot be right and wrong at the same time. That's how crops fail and marriages fall apart. Perhaps, muttered someone. It's not about the colors at all. The debate rippled like wildfire. Voices rose. Hands waved. Someone overturned a basket of plantains by accident. Two women argued so loudly about the meaning of truth that one stormed off, vowing never to speak to the other again. Cato stepped back, amazed. He hadn't meant to cause this. He had only repeated what Eshu had whispered into the wind. Yet now the market, the very heart of the village's daily life, was cracking apart. The cloth merchant accused the yam seller of being blind to reason. The yam seller shouted that the cloth merchant's mind was softer than overcooked rice. Children began shouting their own versions of the riddle. Dogs barked. A clay jug shattered. And still, at the center of it all, was Cato, quiet, still holding the feather, watching the ripple spread outward. Baba O'Neill arrived not long after, drawn by the rising noise. He pushed his way through the crowd, leaning on his cane, his eyes sharp and unreadable. When he saw Cato, standing silently in the center, he did not scold. He simply stared at the boy for a long, heavy moment. What did you say to them? He asked. Cato repeated the riddle once more, softly this time. Baba O'Neill listened. Then he smiled. A tired, knowing smile. This is his work, the old man whispered. Who? Asked a woman nearby. The one who watches from shadows, Baba said. The one who walks both roads and wears both hats. Eshu. Gasps followed. Some people made signs with their fingers. A few spat lightly on the ground. Others grew quiet. But the arguments did not stop. They grew more intense. The butcher accused the baker of always siding with the elders. The baker replied that at least he didn't listen to forest spirits. Someone threw a mango. Baba O'Neill raised his cane. Enough, he shouted. The noise paused, like breath held too long. You have all heard a riddle, the elder said, but instead of sitting with it, you turned it into a spear. Eshu does not bring confusion to break us, he brings it to show us who we already are. Silence, then murmuring, then guilt. People slowly returned to their stalls. A woman began to sweep up the shattered jug. Children were called back to their mothers. The market tried to resume, but the air had changed. Baba O'Neill stepped toward Cato. Do you know what you've done? He asked. Cato shook his head. I remembered the words. That's all. The elder studied him. You did not remember them. You were given them. He looked down at the feather still in Cato's hand. It shimmered briefly, catching a sliver of sunlight. Come, the old man said. Let us walk. They left the edge of the market and wandered down the path toward the quiet fields beyond. You have drawn his attention, Baba said. You must be careful. I didn't ask for this, Cato said. Few ever do, Baba replied. But once you walk in Eshu's shadow, your words are no longer just yours. They become questions. And questions, real questions, and settle the world. They reached a termite mound near the edge of the field and sat down. The wind rustled the tall grass. Eshu does not choose lightly, Baba continued. Perhaps you're meant for more than storytelling under trees. Cato looked down at the feather. Is this a gift or a curse? The elder chuckled. That depends on how you use it. And in the distance, behind the hills, the faint sound of a flute began to play again, just one note, soft and sly, like a wink made of sound. Twilight in the village came softly, like a story whispered instead of told. The sky dimmed from brilliant orange to gentle violet, the trees casting longer and thinner shadows across the packed earth. Chickens wandered back into their pens. The fires began to rise in doorways. The yam pots hissed their last steam before feeding hungry mouths. And yet, the world felt unfinished. Cato wandered alone, the feather still clutched in his hand. He had not gone home after the market incident. The voices of the villagers still echoed in his mind, bitter, confused, agitated. And then there was Bob O'Neill's final warning. Once you walk in Eshu's shadow, your words are no longer just yours. The road he walked was familiar. It led away from the market, past the granary, along the dry edge of the forest. But tonight, it felt changed. The wind seemed to walk beside him, whispering just low enough to make him lean in, but never quite loud enough to hear clearly. At a bend in the path, Cato stopped. A log rested there, worn smooth by time and travelers. He sat down slowly, as though the wood might judge him. He stared at the feather again. Its color shifted subtly in the fading light, black to blue to red. It had weight, but not in the usual way. It felt like a key, a question, or maybe both. "Long walk for a boy so small," came a voice, creaky and thin. Cato looked up sharply. Standing just down the path was a man. No, not a man exactly. He was hunched and wrapped in layers of tattered cloth. His skin was dark, wrinkled like old bark. His eyes were yellow and gleaming. He leaned on a stick carved with strange notches and carried a sack over his back. A beggar. A stranger. Cato stood up quickly. "Who are you?" The man grinned, revealing teeth too perfect for a beggar. "Names again," he chuckled. "Always the names." "Fine, then. Call me whoever you think I am." "I didn't ask for riddles," Cato said, frowning. "Yet here you are," the old man replied, "chasing riddles down empty roads, sitting with feathers that don't belong to birds, asking questions out loud when the smart ones keep them in their teeth." There was a long pause. The sun dipped lower. Shadows lengthened. Cato hesitated. "You know who he is, don't you?" The beggar sat on the log beside Cato, groaning dramatically as if his joints were made of sand. He smelled faintly of smoke and pepper. "Oh, the trickster, the god who is and is not, the one who sells truths wrapped in nonsense and nonsense wrapped in gold." "Yes," Cato said. "Eshu." The beggar's grin widened. "A dangerous name to speak freely. Say it too often, and he might answer." "I think he already has," Cato whispered. The old man leaned in. "Then tell me, child, what did he say to you?" "He gave me a riddle," Cato said, "and everything turned upside down." "Sounds like him," the man muttered. "He does enjoy watching people argue. Not out of cruelty, no, but because confusion reveals." "Reveals what?" "Ah," the man tapped the side of his nose. "Now you're asking the right question." They sat for a while in silence. A bird called once in the trees, then was silent. The road stretched before them, golden and dusty. Behind them, the village lights flickered faintly. "You know," the beggar said suddenly, "Eshu walks both roads." Cato turned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the man said, leaning back, "if two roads lead to different places, he will choose both. If a man tells the truth and another lies, Eshu will sit between them and sell both stories. If day turns to night, he's the one holding the lantern. He does not pick sides. He is the side." "That doesn't make sense," Cato said. "Exactly," the man laughed. "And neither does the world. So Eshu walks it." Cato frowned. "So, does that mean he's good or bad?" The man stopped laughing. His eyes grew serious. "Neither. And both. To some, he's a trickster who ruins plans. To others, He's the only reason the gods even speak to mortals. He delivers prayers, but sometimes he rearranges them on the way. Why? Because, the beggar whispered, no one learns from a straight road. You must trip, fall, and ask why the stone was there. That's where growth lives. Cato looked down. The feather seemed to pulse softly in his hand, like it breathed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Cato said finally. I'm not a priest. I'm not even grown. Yet he came to you. The beggar said, he does not care about age or title. He chooses the curious, the ones with restless questions. He stood, his rags catching the wind. Come, he said. Let's walk. Cato followed, unsure why. The man limped, yet moved quickly. His staff tapped the dirt in a steady rhythm. They reached a fork in the road, a literal crossroads. The same one from before, but now it looked different. Sharper, deeper. It hummed with energy. The man stopped. In the center, every moment is a crossroad, he said. Every choice is a prayer. You may not realize it, but when you decide, when you choose, you speak a language the gods understand. He looked at Cato, his eyes gleaming gold. That's why Eshu walks here. Not to block the path, but to witness which way you go. I don't know where either path leads, Cato said. No one ever does, the man replied. That's the fun. The wind shifted. A breeze stirred the trees. A soft flute note trembled on the air, far away, then vanished. The man turned and began to walk down the right-hand path. Cato stayed behind. He looked down both roads. One led to the forest deep, dark, full of stories. The other led to the hills dry, open, lonely. He couldn't see the ends, only the beginnings. He looked down at the feather again. Then, slowly, he lifted his eyes. The beggar was gone. Gone. Without sound, without sign. Only a single mark remained. In the dirt where he had stood, a swirling circle with two arrows pointing in opposite directions. Cato stared at it. Then he smiled, just a little. I think I understand now, he whispered. And as he turned back toward the village, the wind laughed, not cruelly, but like an old friend hiding behind a tree. Delighted that you finally found their hiding place. The path that Eshu led them down coiled like a serpent through thick vines and blooming tamarind trees, their branches casting slow-moving shadows on the red soil below. With every step, the air grew warmer, heavier with sense of spice, earth, and the distant burn of charcoal. Kojo followed, feet aching, lips dry. Yet his curiosity burned brighter than any discomfort. Eshu walked ahead, not looking back, humming a strange, off-key tune that seemed to twist and shift with each note. It wasn't a melody. Exactly, it was a suggestion, a question, a dare. After what felt like an hour of silence punctuated only by bird song and the crunch of gravel underfoot, the trees parted to reveal a scene that could only be described as impossible. Before them stretched a vast market, but not like the ones Kojo had visited with his mother in the village. This was a market made entirely of mirrors, shimmering, leaning, floating, even spinning on their own accord. Mirror stalls stood where wooden booths should have been, and vendors were reflections, selling shimmering illusions to mirrored buyers. Every step into this space echoed twice, once from Kojo's feet and once from his reflection. Eshu spread his arms wide. Welcome, he grinned, to the mirror market of Ngasa. Here, what you see is not what you buy. And what you buy, well, it may never leave you. Kojo's eyes darted from one glinting corner to another. It was dizzying. The light refracted so many times he could hardly tell what was real and what was mere glass. And yet the voices, the haggling, the laughter, the music of drums were real to real. What is this place? Kojo asked, his voice small among the shimmering noise. Eshu's face turned serious for a brief flicker. This market exists in the in-between. Not quite the spirit world. Not quite the world of flesh. It opens only when a question grows too loud in someone's heart, and you, little Kojo, are loud indeed. Kojo gulped. Why bring me here? To learn, to choose, Eshu replied. But most importantly to see. The trickster led Kojo to a stall where a shimmering woman, whose features changed ever so slightly each time he blinked, stood behind a long glass table. The table held no objects, only flat mirrors, each reflecting a different scene, as though the glass showed memories rather than mere reflections. This is the cellar of selves, Eshu explained. Here, you may see the lives you might have lived, or may yet live. Be warned, they show not just greatness, but your failures too. The woman turned to Kojo, her eyes kind, though constantly shifting color. Would you like to see? Kojo hesitated. Will it hurt? She smiled. Only the truth does. He nodded. She gestured for him to pick one mirror. Kojo's fingers hovered over the nearest one, glowing slightly gold at the edges. When he touched it, the surface rippled like water. A scene emerged. Kojo, as a grown man, sitting high upon a carved wooden throne, draped in leopard skin and gold. His face was stern, wise, a king. But even as Kojo leaned closer, he saw the wear in that face, the loneliness in his eyes, the burden behind the crown. He pulled away quickly. Another mirror drew him in. This one was cooler, almost blue. He saw himself as a traveling storyteller, barefoot, laughing. Children and elders gathered in a circle to hear his tales. He looked poor, yes, but full of joy. His face glowed with mischief and peace in equal measure. He smiled at that one, but the third mirror he chose was the one that made him flinch. He was older in this one, hunched, bitter, living alone in a hut filled with broken tools and faded memories. His eyes were sharp, but angry. He shouted at ghosts, or maybe at himself. Kojo backed away. Eshu, watching, nodded solemnly. Each path grows from choices you haven't made yet. But the mirrors, they show what might be, not what must be. But how do I choose? Kojo asked, overwhelmed. What if I make the wrong choice? There are no wrong choices, said Eshu. Only the stories you learn from. The mirror vendor nodded once, and the mirrors faded back into dull glass. The scenes vanished, as if they'd never been there at all. They moved deeper into the market. Now the stalls began to shift. Some were made of smoke, some of sand. One, Kojo noticed, was made entirely from whispers, each voice offering a different kind of truth, or lie, or secret. And they all spoke at once. The Eshu took him to a booth with no reflection at all. It looked like a blank sheet of black cloth, floating in the air. This is the booth of forgotten names, Eshu whispered. Here, people come to trade the parts of themselves they no longer want. Memories, guilt, even love. A hunched man stepped forward from the shadows, holding a woven basket full of tiny, glowing objects. He offered it to Kojo wordlessly. What are they? Kojo asked. Regrets, said Eshu. You may take one, but beware, it may not be yours. Kojo peered in. The glow from the basket cast strange shadows on his face. He picked up a regret. It felt warm, then cold, like a pulse. In that moment, he saw a girl's face, someone he had never met. She was crying, alone, her village burning in the distance. Kojo dropped the regret, shaken. "It's not mine," he whispered. "Yeshu nodded. "But now you carry its weight, even briefly. That is how the market teaches." They walked on. A crowd had formed near the center of the market. A circle of figures danced around a massive tree that grew upside down. Its roots reached for the sky. Its branches dug into the earth. Round it, spirits, humans, and hybrids chanted in dozens of tongues. Kojo could understand none of it, yet he felt the rhythm in his bones. "The tree of Misrule," Eshu said with reverence. "The heart of the market. It remembers all the bargains ever made here." "Do people make many deals?" Kojo asked. "Constantly," said Eshu. "But the market only gives you what you already deserve." As they turned to leave, a mirror suspended in mid-air followed them, reflecting Kojo's face. Except, the reflection didn't move. Kojo stopped. The reflection spoke. "You doubt yourself." Kojo stiffened. "You're not me. I am the version of you that never asked questions. That stayed in the village. That played safe." Kojo clenched his fists. "I don't want to be you." The mirror shattered into dust. Eshu placed a gentle hand on Kojo's shoulder. "Then you won't be." They walked in silence toward the market's edge, where the mirrors thinned and the real-world sounds began to seep through. Bird calls, the wind, the rustle of grass, as they stepped beyond the boundary of the mirror. Market, the shimmering dissolved behind them. Not a trace remained, only the echoes of what Kojo had seen. The lives he could live, the truths he could no longer ignore. Eshu didn't speak again until they were deep into the trees once more. "You carry something new now," he said softly. Kojo nodded. "My own questions." Eshu grinned wide. "Good, now we can begin." The forest had grown quiet and naturally so. No birds, no wind. Even the trees seemed to be holding their breath. Eshu stood at the edge of an ancient clearing, one foot barely brushing the moss-covered earth. He was no longer smiling. The usual mischievous glint in his eye had dimmed. For the first time in what seemed like centuries, the trickster was unsure of his next step. In the center of the clearing stood a ring of ancestral stones, smooth and time-worn, encircling a low altar of carved obsidian. Round it, 12 spectral figures shimmered in the air, spirits of judgment, drawn from the depths of the underworld and the heights of the celestial plains. They were neither gods nor mortals, but something in between, ancient arbiters called upon only when balance had been broken, and Eshu had broken much. From the cracked sky above them to the fevered unrest in the villages below, the world bore scars of his unchecked meddling. He had tricked warriors into battle, swapped truth for lies among chiefs, made children laugh while making elders weep. Some of it had been necessary to stir stagnation. Some had been careless, and some, perhaps, even cruel. "You know why you have been summoned," said the first arbiter, her voice a woven chord of 3 women's tones, young, middle, and ancient. Eshu nodded. His shoulders rolled back in defiance, but his heart strangely heavy. "I know," he replied, "but I will not say I regret it." The spirits murmured among themselves, a sound like wind through brittle bones. The second arbiter, a form shaped from sand and light, gestured toward the altar. "You may speak, but your tales must not dance. They must burn. You must be truthful, trickster. No riddles here." Eshu took a step forward, then another. His bare feet touched the cool earth inside the circle. The forest seemed to pull back from the clearing's edge, unwilling to be part of this reckoning. He raised his arms and began. "I am Eshu, the one who wears the paths of all crossroads. I am the whisper in the child's dream, and the thorn in the chief's sandal. I bring chaos not for its own sake but to stir truth from stagnation, to remind the world it is alive. The third arbiter, who wore a cloak of coiling serpents, hissed softly, "Your words walk like dancers. We ask you, do you know you've brought pain?" "I do," Eshu replied. "I've seen it. A village burned because I moved a warrior's map. A child lost in the woods because I turned the trail. Lovers torn apart because I whispered doubt into one ear and pride into another." Silence followed. "And why?" asked the sixth arbiter, his voice dry as cinders. "Why did you?" "Because peace had become poison," said Eshu, stepping closer to the altar. "Because truth had become a lullaby no one heard anymore. Because, in a world that forgets to ask questions, a lie can be more sacred than silence." The arbiters conferred again. Clouds rolled across the sky, dark and thick like smoke from an ancient fire. "Do you think yourself a god?" asked the ninth spirit, a creature shaped like a jackal carved from moonlight. "I think myself necessary," Eshu said, simply. The arbiter with serpent cloak slithered forward. "There are those who would kill you for your chaos. Those who cry out for your end. What say you to them?" "I say they're free to try. But they will fail, not because I'm stronger, but because they need me." Eshu's eyes burned again, not with malice, but with purpose. "I am the lesson behind the mistake, the laugh behind the stumble. Without me, the world forgets how to shift." The altar pulsed beneath his feet. "Then be judged," said the eldest arbiter, "not for your essence but for your choices." Each spirit raised a hand or paw, or claw, or misty limb, and from their palms flew shards of memory. They floated around, Eshu like leaves on an unseen wind. Images flickered in the air. A woman crying beside a road where her lover had never returned. A child's broken toy, cursed by Eshu's magic to speak lies. A chief's funeral, where truth had been traded for power. And then others. A famine averted because Eshu had redirected a merchant caravan. A disease cured when he tricked a healer into discovering a hidden route. A war prevented by a joke whispered at the right time. The circle pulsed again. And now it was not just Eshu who felt it but the world. Somewhere, birds resumed their call. The forest seemed to lean closer again. "You are both poison and cure," said the fourth arbiter. "You undo, and yet you ignite." Eshu did not speak. The 10th arbiter leaned forward, her form flickering between human and hyena. "We cannot undo what you've done, but we can bind what comes next." At those words, the altar opened, cracking down the center like a mouth opening in the earth. From within rose a mask, half white and half black, carved with shifting symbols. It floated before Eshu. "This is the mask of reflection," the eldest arbiter said. "You will wear it for a cycle of moons. It will not hide your face, but show others what they fear or hope from you. You will no longer walk unseen. Your intent will no longer be hidden." Eshu frowned. "So, my tricks will no longer be mine?" "No," the spirits said in unison. "They will still be yours, but your audience will know they are being tricked. The laughter will be louder, but so will the pain." Eshu paused. Then, with a breath, he reached out and took the mask. It felt like thunder and feathers in his hand, heavy and light. He placed it on his face. Immediately, the forest roared back to life. Wind surged through the trees. Shadows peeled away from the ground. The arbiters faded one by one, their forms becoming part of the wind. Only Eshu remained, standing in the circle of stones, now alone but not lonely. A path opened behind him, a new one he hadn't seen before. He smiled beneath the mask. The trial was done. The game was not. Beneath the ancient, gnarled baobab tree, the air was thick with anticipation. A circle had formed wide, silent, and sacred. The village elders sat upon low stools carved from termite-eaten wood, their robes drawn over their knees like drapes, shielding ancient knowledge. Eshu stood at the center of the circle, barefoot, calm, his walking stick planted gently into the dirt. His eyes were amused, as though the trial about to begin was just another game, another riddle to dance through. All of Angel's village had gathered. Children clung to their mothers' wraps. Warriors stood with spears grounded, the sun bouncing from the smooth bronze of their chests. The drums had long since ceased. Silence now reigned, except for the wind, which flickered through the baobab's leaves and whispered Eshu's name again and again like a chant, or a warning. "You stand accused," said Chief Ao, his voice measured, yet carrying the weight of many moons, of deception, of chaos, of guiding Kofi, our strongest warrior, into the path of the spirits, where he has not returned, of shifting signs, confusing omens, and breaking the order we hold sacred. Eshu tilted his head. "And yet, have I not always walked among you? Have I not whispered truth as often as I've whispered tricks?" The elder beside the chief raised. "A cowrie shall rattle. Speak only when called." Eshu. The gods were listening. The ancestors were listening. And the people wanted answers. One by one, voices rose to offer witness. A young woman spoke of how Eshu had once given her seeds that grew backward, sprouting roots into the sky. A hunter described how Eshu's laughter led him into a cave that twisted in circles, where he aged a year in a single afternoon. An old herbalist trembled as he explained how Eshu had exchanged his satchel of herbs for leaves. That turned his patience blue. Each tale ended the same way, a glint in Eshu's eye, a trick that made sense only in hindsight, if at all. And yet, for each accusation, Eshu smiled not out of arrogance, but out of mystery, as if he, too, were watching this unfold from a step behind the veil. When his turn came to speak, he did not shout, he did not plead. "I do not deny what I am," Eshu said. "I am the curve in the road, the shadow at the base of your foot. But tell me, do crops grow in straight lines? Do rivers run without bends? I am not chaos, I am movement. Without me, paths never cross, lovers never meet, stories never begin." A murmur moved through the crowd like a ripple in still water. The youngest among them listened most closely, eyes wide. "But you stole Kofi from us," the chief replied. Eshu leaned on his staff. "No, Kofi chose the path. I merely stood at the crossroads. I told no lies. I offered no force. The path he walked led into the spirit's realm. Yes, but it was one he longed to walk, though he did not know it." "But why?" cried Kofi's mother, stepping forward, tears carving rivers down her cheeks. "Why let him vanish without warning?" Eshu's face softened. "Would you have rather watched him go, knowing you could not stop him? I am mercy in confusion. I am kindness in riddles." The elders huddled. The air trembled, heavy with judgment. It was rare to bring a god to trial, rarer still to risk condemning one. But Eshu was not a god of temples. He lived among them, as likely to drink palm wine, beside a fire as he was to appear in dreams. Suddenly, a small voice broke the quiet. "I saw Kofi," said a child barely taller than Eshu's hip. "Last night, in my sleep. He was smiling. He said he was home." The crowd stirred. Dreams were sacred in Angel. Messages often passed through the sleep realm, especially when delivered by children. A hush fell again. Eshu, the chief finally, said, "You walk a line between harm and help, between mischief and meaning. We cannot bind you, we cannot banish you, but we can warn others." Eshu chuckled, spinning his walking stick once before planting it again. "You cannot warn them more than I already do. My laughter is the signpost. My footsteps are the drumbeat. I am never hidden." The trial ended not with punishment but with a proverb. Eshu dances backward but always toward the fire. That night, the baobab's leaves rustled as if clapping in the wind. Eshu did not remain in the village. At dawn, only footprints were found, some small, some wide, as if he had walked in many shapes. The elders never spoke of judgment again, only of remembering to question, to look twice, and to honor the crossroads when they appeared. From then on, every child in Angel grew up hearing that truth is rarely straight, and that the trickster is not always the enemy, but the reminder that even gods must be watched with open eyes. And far beyond the village, somewhere between two paths, Eshu laughed softly, fondly, as if even this trial had been exactly what he hoped for. The sun had set long ago, leaving only the burnished glow of a crescent moon high above the whispering trees of the savannah. The fires around the village of Nkara flickered low, casting restless shadows across the red clay huts. Eshu stood on the edge of the village, watching from the cover of a tamarind tree. The time had come for the final test, not for him, but for the people who had summoned him. The crossroads he had gifted them now pulsed with unresolved choices. He held in his hand an ancient calabash, its sides polished smooth and etched with delicate symbols. Inside it was no liquid, no fruit, no water, only something far stranger. The villagers believed Eshu's power lay in his tricks, his riddles, his shape-shifting. But what they did not understand was that the true gift of the trickster was reflection, not in words, but in the mirror that let one face their deepest truth. From the shadows, he watched young Kanto, brave, reckless Kanto, approach the center of the village, drawn by a dream that had disturbed his sleep for 3 nights straight. The elders had begun to whisper about Eshu's growing influence, about dreams shared by many, about things being out of balance. The old drummers refused to play. The dogs barked at nothing. The winds carried the scent of roasted yams where no fires burned. Everything hummed with expectation. Kanto saw the calabash resting at the foot of the communal shrine, where the village's offerings to the gods were made. He did not see Eshu in the shadows, nor did he hear the subtle laughter that rippled like wind through elephant grass. All he saw was the object from his dream, waiting for him. He hesitated only a moment before lifting the calabash and peering inside. No water, no coin, no treasure, only a shifting silver surface, glowing softly with moonlight. He tilted it toward himself and gasped. In the reflection, he did not see his face. He saw himself standing at the crossroads, facing two roads. One path was clear, leading toward wealth and power, glory and battle, the love of many. The other was shadowed, meandering through dense forest, alone, uncertain but filled with the scent of old stories, ancestors' voices, the shape of a hidden truth. Then the mirror shimmered again. He saw himself taking the first road, growing older, surrounded by men and women who praised him, feasted with him, danced around him. But the light in his eyes grew dim. He smiled less. He grew paranoid. And he died without a single person. Weeping, the second vision returned. The shadowed road. He walked alone for years, weathering hunger, cold, and strange omens. But eventually, he arrived at a sacred river, and there, he built a village. Children ran to him. Elders came for wisdom. He taught, and loved and laughed. Kanto stumbled back. The calabash dropped to the ground but did not shatter. It rolled gently toward Eshu's feet. As if knowing its path, Eshu emerged from the darkness, barefoot, his walking stick tapping rhythmically on the earth. "You saw yourself," Eshu said. Quietly, Kanto looked up, wide-eyed. "I don't understand. What was that?" "A choice," Eshu replied. "You must make it tonight. But be warned, once you step on one path, you may never return to the other." Kanto's voice trembled. "How can I know which is right?" Eshu smiled with a slant of mischief and sadness. "You can't. That is the point." Behind them, the wind picked up. In the nearby huts, the elders stirred in their sleep. A baby cried out. Somewhere, a drum sounded once. Then silence. Kanto fell to his knees, overwhelmed. "Why me?" "Because you asked the gods to show you your place," Eshu said. "And the gods sent me." Suddenly, the villagers began to gather round, woken by some unseen signal. Men and women with eyes glazed in half-sleep, children clinging to their mothers, elders leaning on carved staffs. They all formed a wide circle around the shrine and the calabash. No one spoke. No one asked why they had come. Eshu turned slowly to face them. "You have slept too long," he said. "You have let the ancestors fade. You have worshipped only what is easy and ignored the crossroads." One elder stepped forward. "We meant no harm, Eshu." "No," Eshu agreed. "But you did not mean truth, either." He lifted the calabash high, and this time, everyone saw their own faces reflected not as they were, but as they could become. Lovers saw betrayal. Children saw strength. Warriors saw gentleness. The greedy saw hunger. The wise saw foolishness. And in each, there was the same whispered question. "What now?" The calabash began to hum. Then it cracked just slightly and light spilled from the fracture. Not burning, but soft and warm like morning sun after a long storm. And with it came the scent of earth after rain, and the sound of old voices singing wordless songs. Eshu placed the calabash back on the shrine, cracked but still whole. "I cannot choose for you," he said. "I only show what is already within." He turned to leave, but a small voice stopped him. A girl, no older than 8, stepped forward from the crowd. "Eshu," she said, "what do you see in the mirror?" Eshu paused. The crowd held its breath. "I see a boy who asked too many questions," Eshu whispered, "and a god who never got any answers." He smiled softly, turned, and vanished into the shadows, leaving the villagers with their truths. The crossroads would remain, but now, each of them would walk it alone. The flames crackled unnaturally, whispering in tongues no living man could understand. Around the sacred pyre, in the heart of the Oba's forest, the air shimmered as though the world itself were holding its breath. Smoke slithered upward, forming shapes that twisted and danced. Masks, faces, serpents, eyes. At the very center stood Eshu, silent, his walking stick planted firmly in the soil, his head tilted as if listening to a faraway song only he could hear. The elders of the village of Ijara had gathered here not by choice, but by compulsion, summoned by dreams they couldn't remember, and songs that hummed through their bones. Each one stood in a daze, wrapped in ceremonial cloth, unsure if they were awake or trapped in some vision spun by a spirit too old and too clever to fight. Kwaku, the village griot, stepped forward, clutching his leather-bound drum. His hands trembled. He had once told stories of Eshu with pride, but tonight, it felt as if those very tales were listening back, waiting to be proven. "You brought us here, Eshu," Kwaku said with a dry throat. For what purpose? The fires speak, but they do not explain. Eshu grinned. Ah, Kwaku, you, of all people, should know that stories never explain. They merely offer. Whether you understand them is your burden. He paced around the fire, the beads on his staff, rattling. There are whispers in the flames tonight. Whispers of endings, of choices made long ago, of crossroads forgotten. The elders shifted nervously. One, a weary man named Fola, stepped forward. If you seek penance, you shall have it. If you seek mischief, let it pass over us. But do not haunt us with riddles, Eshu. Not tonight. Eshu's laughter rang like a bell, bright and unnerving. Haunt? Oh, no, wise Fola. I do not haunt. I remind. I am the hinge between what was and what might be. I am the crossroad, and tonight, each of you must choose your path. He tapped the soil 3 times with his staff. Instantly, the fire dimmed and twisted into 3 distinct trails of flame. Each path led into darkness, into a part of the forest none dared to tread. Each pulsed faintly, one red like a blood moon, another blue like a forgotten river, the third green as the old god's envy. The ancestors stir, Eshu murmured, now serious, and they are displeased. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Kwaku took a hesitant step toward the red path. These flames, they lead to stories, don't they? Eshu nodded. Not stories, truths. One path reveals what you fear, one shows what you lost, and one offers what you never dared to dream. Which is which? Fola demanded. Ah, Eshu said, twirling a coin between his fingers. That would make things too easy. Suddenly, a great gust of wind surged through the clearing, extinguishing the flames at the base of the torches the elders held. Only the pyre remained, glowing fiercely, whispering in voices now louder, more insistent. The smoke drew the shapes of kings and beggars, wars and weddings, births and betrayals. You ask why I summoned you here, Eshu said, stepping into the center. Because your village stands at a crossroad, not just of land, but of time. The spirits you no longer honor stir in anger. The forest you've forgotten remembers your names, and the old bargains, he paused, smiling darkly, are no longer satisfied. Kwaku closed his eyes. He remembered the songs of his grandfather, of offerings at the river bank and festivals where Eshu was honored with kola nuts and sweet rum. Those rites had faded, replaced by modern conveniences, forgotten in favor of progress. Then what must we do? He asked. Eshu pointed to the paths again. Each of you must walk, not together, alone. You will face what you must. What you carry back will decide the fate of Ajara. The forest seemed to lean in, listening. One by one, the elders approached. The flames. Fola was first, choosing the green path without hesitation. His figure was swallowed by trees within seconds. Another followed, then another. Kwaku hesitated. The red path pulsed with a familiar dread. He walked toward it, clutching his drum. The red path was narrower than he expected. Branches brushed against his shoulders, and the shadows stretched too long. The further he went, the more the air changed. The scent of ash and regret filled his lungs. A tree appeared, dead and gnarled. Beneath it sat a boy, no older than 12, with Kwaku's eyes and nose. Kwaku's heart stilled. Papa, the boy said, why didn't you come back for me? The Griot sank to his knees. The boy was a memory, a son lost in a fire long ago. The price of a story left untold in time. I was afraid, Kwaku whispered. I thought forgetting would be easier. The boy looked at him. Then why did you keep singing? Tears streamed down Kwaku's cheeks. He reached out, and the boy vanished into smoke. The path before him cleared. He returned to the clearing, older somehow, his drum now covered in unfamiliar glyphs. Others emerged too, each marked by their journey. One bore a mask that would not come off. Another held a child's shoe. A third carried a bowl filled with black water. Eshu nodded as they returned. Good, you remembered. That is all the spirits ever wanted. The flames at the center flared high, then collapsed into embers. The elders looked at one another. Something had shifted, not in the world, but in them. In the way they breathed, in the way they listened. The Eshu stepped back into the shadows. But before vanishing, he turned. The fire will speak again when it's needed. But remember this. You cannot outrun your crossroads. You must choose, or it chooses you. Then he was gone, as if he had never been there. The night was quiet, but the whispers lingered. The moon hung low over the whispering trees, its pale silver eye watching the land as though it too awaited Eshu's next move. The night was quieter than it had ever been. No drums, no fire chants, no cackling hyenas in the distance. The forest held its breath, and at the center of it all, where four ancient footpaths converged in a ring of red earth, Eshu stood alone, barefoot, his staff carved with laughing faces, and his eyes sharp as obsidian knives. The crossroads, always the crossroads. Behind him lay a trail of laughter, riddles, and chaos. Ahead, well, nothing was ever truly ahead for Eshu. Time bowed to him. Stories bent around his footsteps, and fate kept its distance. But tonight was different. Tonight, the gods had summoned him not to play, not to meddle, but to choose. From the east, Orunmila, the wise one, approached, robed in the sands of time. From the west came Ogun, fierce and burning, his axe still wet with battle sweat. The north bore the graceful wine dancer, Oya, who moved with the scent of storms. And from the south, Yamaya emerged, shimmering like moonlight on ocean water. They came not as enemies, but as judges. Each had once been tricked by Eshu. Each had forgiven him, yet none had forgotten. Now, they sought his answer. You have shaped too many fates, Eshu. Orunmila's voice rumbled like old thunder. We must know, what do you truly seek? Eshu spun his staff lazily and grinned. Ah, the question finally comes. What does the trickster want? Ogun took a step forward. If chaos is your gift, then take it back. The villages are weary. Even the griots grow tired of singing your name. Yet they never stop singing it, Eshu replied, flicking a coal and nut in the air and catching it in his mouth. Yamaya's eyes softened. You could rest, Eshu. Stories will still remember you, but peace is a path too, not just mischief. Oya's hair danced in the unseen wind. Or are you just afraid to choose? Because the game ends once you do? Eshu stopped smiling. The silence between them pressed like a storm cloud ready to burst. And then, from the shadows of the trees, a child stepped forward. A boy no older than 10, barefoot like Eshu, holding nothing but a worn-out drum. His eyes gleamed with that same wild spark, the flicker of curiosity, mischief, and wonder. Why are the gods afraid of laughter? The boy asked. The gods turned, startled. Eshu raised his brows. The boy pointed at him. He makes people laugh. He makes them think. That's what stories are. That's what my Baba said. Who is your Baba? Yamaya asked. I don't know. The boy shrugged. Mama said he left at the crossroads. Eshu's smirk faded. Just slightly. The gods looked at each other, unsure. And then, for the first time, Eshu spoke not as a trickster, but as something else older, perhaps more still than he had ever been. There was a time when the crossroads were not feared. They were places of decision, not deception. But people grew lazy. They asked for easy answers. So I gave them games. If they would not learn by wisdom, they would learn by folly. You made fools of kings, Orunmila said, and I made kings of fools, Eshu replied. Ogun stepped forward again, this time without threat. And now, Eshu said, walking slowly to the boy and resting his hand on his shoulder. I think the world needs new stories, not of gods or monsters, but of those who choose paths without knowing what lies ahead. The crossroads shimmered. The earth cracked just slightly beneath them, and a strange light spilled upward, not blinding, not holy, just true. The boy looked up at Eshu. Will you come with me? Eshu looked at the four roads, then at the gods, then at the stars. No, he whispered. I've already walked them all, but I will watch, and I will whisper. With that, he tapped his staff 3 times. The trees rustled. The boy turned, and the path behind him changed, became something older than memory, something new and yet ancient. He walked, and as he did, he beat the drum once. Boom. And the jungle exhaled. Eshu stayed behind. The gods disappeared into wind and wave. The crossroads quieted once more, and in the silence, a whisper. Every tale must end, so a new one can begin.